Hey everyone, welcome to another G News update. Well, this morning you may have read in Simon Wilson's column in the New Zealand Herald that George Monbiot, the columnist at The Guardian, had commented that our minds are actually interrupted by corporate interference all the time, that corporates are seeking through media to actually get in there and kind of mess with us in the conversations that we have about our government, about what we can choose to do or what we can't choose to do, and who we should vote for. So that corporate interference, if you like, it manifests in different ways, particularly around some of the ways in which we don't actually act on climate change. We hear things about climate and we just shut down. And we've been doing that now for 40 years or more. And over at COP30, there's been a downgrading of New Zealand in the last day, where we've won another fossil award. This is the second fossil award we've won. We're using the government that we've currently got as the umbrella that's in common between both fossil awards. So the first one was because we reversed the ban on offshore exploration for oil and gas, those permits, whilst the existing ones were allowed to carry on. And we continued to explore everywhere, and when we drilled everywhere and we didn't find any gas, it was said that somehow or another this actually stopped investment. But big oil companies have been pulling out for years. They just weren't finding gas here, and even if they did, they wouldn't find any more. If they did find some, that would take 10 years to bring it into production. So that was the first one. The second one was because this government decided to halve our methane targets. So that meant that we will actually produce a lot more methane than we otherwise would have by 2050. And this is all about money and the kind of false idea that, our farmers need to be protected from the effects of their climate obligations in the Paris Accord. Otherwise, we'll all just go offshore and people will buy from somebody else. So that's the argument. So for those two reasons, we've won these big fossil awards, and we've been downgraded. We're now at 44th, I think it is, on the list. We used to be quite high up and a leader in climate. But we just block our ears, and we kind of influence somehow or another. Our thinking is constantly being attacked. When you think about it in a New Zealand context, where are you hearing that from? And I think what you can step back and think is we've got a Canadian billionaire who's just decided he's very interested in owning the New Zealand Herald. We've got a former National Party MP that's the chair now of NZME, which is all of these media assets. So these people represent the interests of the very, very rich, and not the interests of the middle class or the tradies or anyone else, but they're busy spreading information that's designed to influence the way that you think, to interrupt your thinking about climate change, that somehow or another, it's all off the table now, that we're just going to drive cars forever, we're just going to keep on belching out emissions and it doesn't matter. And the way that this kind of manifests, in my opinion, is that you'll see something like a Green Party being vilified or called names, like we just mock them. They're just a bunch of Marxists, they're wave the fairies, unicorns. They don't have anything tangible. They're all just theory, that kind of thinking, So that kind of thing comes through the corporate media. And we mock people, we just, get ad hominem on their arse, and we sort of attack them, and then we smirk and we laugh, and we don't, care much about the science. We really don't. We just carry on. And this basically is a lot of middle-class tradespeople, men particularly. They've got very strong views, and they think they know that climate change is a hoax because somebody on YouTube told them, or, they talked in the pub. And so you've got all these attitudes, but you've also got it coming at you from corporate media. And that corporate media is about the very, very rich and defending their wealth against any kind of attack. And believe me, the petroleum industry doesn't want a quick transition away from fossil fuels, neither do coal mining companies or these big mining companies. So they donate to political parties that will continue their agenda. So this is all very obvious, isn't it? But this is what's happening. But in this morning's context, let's just take a look at what happened. One of the first things that happened on Radio New Zealand this morning is Chloe Swarbrick from the Greens came on, and she had a very, very special message. She wanted to get through to everybody via Corin Dan, and that was that this government is leaving us all on the hook, for massive future billions and billions of dollars by doing less now in terms of, carbon emissions reduction, and really just kind of flouting or faltering on our obligations when it comes to the climate and our NDCs, if you like, under the Paris Agreement, that we won't even make those. We're starting to talk as if we're not going to actually honour those. And so Chloe was just kind of saying, look, this is actually going to eventually be brought from, off the books into the books by Treasury as a massive liability. We've got to face up to it. This government is making things worse by delays, and it's stuffing around, and it's got these 2 fossil awards already, and it's going to continue on that path. So in that process, in that interview, there was a kind of a mention of the fact that on the 8th of December 2024, the Green Party had actually come out and kind of detailed its plan for the climate. And Hei Ata-Marae, I can't remember the name of the document, but it was symptomatic that I can't remember, that you probably can't either, and you probably don't recall all the detail of all of the Greens policies. But those policies, and that's the point, have been out there for ages, but they haven't been canvassed or talked about very much. They get a once-over lightly treatment, and then they're kind of brushed aside. Basically, what Chloe was reminding us all was that we've actually had this policy out there now, which would show that if you followed the Greens policy, you could reduce our emissions by 5 times the amount that this government's intending to. And it's all detailed in a plan. You can see it. It's evidence-based. But we've been messed with by the corporates, and this is the thing about, what George Monbiot is saying, is that we shut down basically because when the Greens come up and show us something, or a scientist comes up and show us something that's evidence-based and here's a good idea and it's about the climate, we just kind of close down and go, Marxists, communists, socialists, scientists, whatever, it's a hoax, HOKES. And you see this kind of thinking, where we just shut down and we bow down. And I don't think the middle class people realise that it's the billionaire class or the very, very wealthy who have captured and bought the media and are actually programming them to have these attitudes, to be divided amongst themselves. So I think that is the dynamic we're seeing with the Green Party all the time, that it puts out a whole lot more information. It put out a green budget in July. It wasn't really talked about very much, was it? They went on a big roadshow around New Zealand, but how many people can remember it? They've done quite a bit in terms of, detailing how a wealth tax might be important for us. And that's kind of been rubbished, and kind of dismissed using capital flight as the main objection, I suppose. And it's been rubbished by Newstalk ZB, who is part of the corporate media and the people intervening with the way that New Zealanders think, and have been for quite some time, on behalf of these big interests like the petroleum industry, oil and gas, miners, etc. All the stuff that's considered to be good and good jobs and all this kind of stuff. Jobs when it comes to things that hurt the environment or make the climate change conditions actually more risky as we approach tipping points. So what chance do we have, the middle classes, the people that do care about all these things, if big portions of our society are constantly being brainwashed by this corporate media? So I personally had a kind of an experience of this sort of thing this morning, again, where I had to block another 100 or so people who were not even people, they're just bots that have been created by somebody out there, but they're not real human beings, they're just fake profiles on the media. And they're programmed to hunt out and seek any kind of mention of Jacinda Ardern, and then basically say, well, she's a witch, she should be in jail, something violent should happen to her, she destroyed the economy when she didn't, and what else? Well, something to do with a horse or Mr. Ed or something like that, that same old joke. So all the bots, and there are thousands of them, I think I've probably blocked close to 1,000 of them in the last 24 hours, are programmed to do these 4 or 5 things, and they all do it religiously the same. None of them spell very well, but this is the algorithm, and this is also some kind of programming that's actually taking place on social media in order for very wealthy interests to actually bat down whatever this woman thinks or whatever she has stood for. It has to be kind of browbeaten down so that nobody in New Zealand feels like it's safe to even talk about things. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm bringing a kind of a sword to this, and I'm going to challenge all of this. And I believe, and I think I'm right, that it's a very, very tiny minority actually of New Zealanders that really think this way, and that the vast majority of what you see on social media is really just man-created bots, fake profiles basically, who all do these same things. So that's corporate interference like George Monbiot is talking about, which, you know, Simon Wilson is pointing out when it comes to climate. So yes, here was Jacinda Ardern at COP30 talking about how we all should do our part. And by that she means small nations, you know, like New Zealand, not just leave it to China or America, but actually for all of us collectively, because if you add up all the small nations, they actually come to roughly a third of the contribution. So we all have to do our part. And I think most New Zealanders believe that. But you've got this interference. You've got all these bots rushing in, trying to tell you that it's a witch, or it's you know, someone that needs to go to jail, or something to do with a horse, or running in a horse race. So, which is irrational and insulting and abusive, and all those kind of things that are just not the New Zealand way. So that's not us, is it? We're actually better than that. But this is what happens on social media. So that's the kind of septic side, and we need to stand up to it. Otherwise, the corporates and the billionaires and the very, very rich will win. I'll mention as well that on the Herald Now, Chloe went up against David Seymour this morning with Garth Braid, and there was kind of a whole bunch of ad hominem attacks from David Seymour, attacking Chloe Swarbrick. She wasn't allowed to speak, she was talked over, and at the end they had this whole concision thing where they'd run out of time. So politicians are talking very, very fast, and they're trying to get everything out in a very short time, say 5 or 6 minutes is the window, and there's a kind of a battle for, you know, get my message over. But if you've got someone attacking you personally at the same time, that's the environment that the Herald is. You know, that's the environment of this corporate sort of territory. Someone's come in there, happens to be female, someone's come in there that happens to actually be talking about climate and a better way of doing things, or taxing the wealthy, and those kind of reasons why that's important for us. And what happens to them? Well, they get attacked, okay? And then the host goes, oh, well, that's all the time we've got. And we don't get to hear the full message because it's talked over by the likes of Seymour. Now, the ACT Party are the party of the extreme, small, wealthy group of people protecting their interests at all costs. And that's why they're so strong about getting rid of the treaty out of our schools, out of getting the treaty out of the way of environmental considerations when it comes to infrastructure projects. And so they're right in behind this whole fast-tracking idea. And you may have heard the news this morning that, well, you know, the Green Party are pretty strong on the idea that quite a few of these future consents that haven't been consented yet will be illegitimate because the processes that have been set up to judge them and base them into law are illegitimate. You know, that they've skirted around a balanced, proper environmental set of protections. They avoid the Environment Court. And community voice has been stamped out everywhere. Community voice like here at the Peritahi Marae, where everyone is welcome and everyone from all over the place can come. And we together as people can actually tell government what it is that we do not want when it comes to projects in our environment that affect the way we live and the communities that we live in and around us. But this corporate media is driving over the top of that, trying to interfere with the way that we think, so that when it comes to elections, they tilt all those playing fields. They control the debates. They control everything. And, you know, we saw that this morning, you know, with Chloe not being able to speak. We've also really kind of come to the stage where Gary Stevenson has finally decided to come out to Australia and New Zealand because there needs to be an international level of cooperation. We can't just let politicians make decisions for us. We've all got to actually do this ourselves, which is why I've come down here to the Marae this morning to try and talk to you about this kind of interference with the way we think that's going on from our corporate media. And it's happening all over the world. So Guy and Espinard interviewed Gary Stevenson, and it's on 30 Now. I do recommend you all watch it. It's on YouTube at the moment. And in that interview, the first half of it was basically about Gary and Gary's journey as a trader, the story of kind of like a Goodwill Hunting story, someone who came from the poor end of town and made it big because he was great at maths and was able to pick something that was happening that everybody thought wouldn't happen, and therefore he made a lot of money as a trader, one of the best in the world. But what he's trying to tell us, and what the big message is for you, is that if you do not do something about the situation that we're facing at the moment, and you do not tax the rich, and you just continue to do this thing where you shut down because Mike Hosking and Heather Duplessis-Allen and Stephen Joyce and Television New Zealand and everybody else in those corporate media roles have actually influenced your thinking, then what's going to happen is that your children are actually going to lose when it comes to a competition for the available resources with the children of the rich. So, for example, Nicola Willis's children, they will have so much more advantage because they will have access to all the opportunities. They will buy up all the shops, they will buy up all the land, they will buy up all the houses, they'll buy up all of the factories. They will own everything because we didn't tax the wealthy, right? And that will just get worse and worse and worse. And the average person that has a job, goes and gets a trade, works really hard, they used to be able to kind of put food on the table. They used to be able to bring up a family. They used to have a freehold house, their own quarter-acre section. Those days are gone now because we don't tax the wealthy in New Zealand. So in that conversation with Gary, this is the kind of stuff Gary's saying, is you've got to eventually come to the point where you tax the wealthy and you tax them fairly, because if you don't and you just stay with that status quo, what's going to happen is the wealthy are coming for you. They're coming for your assets. You're going to lose your home. You're going to lose everything. The rates are going up. Everything's going to be too expensive. You're going to be kicked out. So the inequality is the problem, and the inequality is fostered and made worse under Christopher Luxon and David Seymour and the parties of the wealthy, who have everything at their disposal, all the big donations, all the money, all the marketing, and all of the media basically in behind them, interfering with the way that we think about evidence and science, etc. So the Maori world faces this as well. So we're all in this together, New Zealand. We've all got to do something. We can't just sit around waiting for politicians to do it. You have to do something, and it's a call to action, really, that New Zealanders need to get active, and you need to start looking at the fact that it's good to have a capital gains tax. It's good to say, hey, look, let's start getting more access for people so that we can go and see a GP. Let's stop the situation where we're going to hospital, because we couldn't afford to actually see the doctor, or there weren't enough doctors. That's great. But we need to go further, don't we? We need to go quite a bit further in the long run if we want to actually stop the other alternatives, which Gary said were, they're going to shrink the welfare state. They're going to come after your benefits. They're going to come crashing down on your 18 and 19-year-olds. They're going to make mum and dad worse off. They're going to stress out families. They're going to impoverish people, cutting the benefits, pulling down wage increases for everybody, making everybody poorer. And this is what you're seeing them do. Or you're going to see them selling off the silverware, selling off things that would have actually been ours to make money from, but we won't be. So they'll impoverish us that way. And where does that go? To somebody else overseas who then benefits. And the same is the case for debt. When you are paying off debt, who's making money out of that? Right, well, so huge profits to the banks, huge profits to all of the people who are the members of the NZ Initiative, and the NZ Initiative are part of the Atlas Network. And this is a global agenda for wealth inequality and for protecting wealth. And nations are beaten down by this corporate media. And so the people who are trying to tell you about it are vilified, and they're made to suffer ad hominem attacks in that environment. So they keep going there. Now, I keep saying things like, well, why don't you just come to G News and get your message out? Because here we are. Yesterday we had 870,000 views or something. But some people just ignore me, don't think I'm very important, I suppose. Tell me it matters, but don't pitch up. So I'm just saying, well, that's okay if you want to keep doing that, but I think you should come here and use this platform. So if you've got policies coming up and you want to talk about it, if you've got stuff that you really want to get out there, talk to me. There's also this big petition that was handed in. That's another thing I want to talk about. That was about 270 metres long, something like that. It's a huge petition, isn't it? And there were 95,000 signatures. Now this is our friend Malcolm Mulholland. He'd been going around the country since about September last year. And this is called the Buller Declaration, because it started in Buller. And I think that's right. And so the nurses organisation and everybody have actually assisted in this. But this is about the fact that in New Zealand, when it comes to our health system, there's a crisis. And people may not actually realise there's a health crisis, but there really is, because they're hearing another message from the corporate media that's messing with our minds, just like in climate change. They're telling us that there's been a record spend, that we've actually got all these new nurses, that there's no problems. But the people that actually work in the hospitals are telling you that's not true. The corporate media are messing with your mind again. Just like the people that are messing with the idea that Jacinda is somehow, guilty of something, like destroying the economy, when she's not. I mean, that was a COVID pandemic that, affected countries all over the world. They all had inflation. They all had these same kind of problems with crime and that kind of thing. That's universal, man. That happened across the world. So, this is corporate media generating bots, generating algorithms, and owning social media, owning corporate media, messing with us. And so the health system, we've got to change it. We've got to care about it. And particularly people in rural areas, Maori, Pacifica, they're very, very disadvantaged. If we don't do something about it, then it's just going to get worse, isn't it? The status quo is not working. The idea that Christopher Luxon can stand there and say, look, we've put a record amount of spending, 17 billion. Well, that's not until about 2030 that even most of that money even gets spent, so it's a lot less. And Christopher Luxon is actually very, very deceptive in the way that he talks. He's starting to be very Trumpist because his party's in trouble. It's spinning out that Ipsos poll. People put a big emphasis on that Ipsos poll yesterday, rightly, because it really did show that on all the main counts, like the economy, national are down the drain. On inflation, national are down the drain. On the cost of living, they're down the drain. They're just down the drain. They're basically lost. People have stopped listening to Christopher Luxon now. He's not listenable because he's not telling the truth. I mean, here's an example. Yesterday, he's talking about a 35-year recession. He's talking about a 35-year recession. He was talking about it in the media. He talked about it at a press conference. And then he talked about it again in Parliament. Here's the parliamentary clip.
Well, I'm proud of this government inheriting a 35-year recession.
Honourable Chris Hipkins.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister continues to claim that the government inherited a recession. I seek leave to table the Statistics New Zealand data that shows that the economy was not in recession under Labor. It went into recession under National.
I'm sure that information is publicly available.
So you can see there that Chris Hipkins had said, look, this is obviously a factually incorrect misrepresentation, or what social media people outside Parliament who aren't MPs would say, a bald-faced lie from Christopher Luxon, but he's carrying on with it in a Trumpian way. So this Trumpian lying and, dishonesty from Christopher Luxon, so it's not going to help him. But some people in corporate media will grasp onto that because they won't question things, pretty much like if they come across a whole bunch of anti-Jacinda hater bots, they won't be able to distinguish if that's a real person or not, and they'll delusionally say, oh, we're the majority, it's not a tiny group. But it actually is a tiny group. It's just they don't have the evidence behind them. It's just a small group of people who have been influenced by social media bots. And this is what happens with corporate media. You've been influenced by corporate media. So that's kind of what I wanted to say today. There's actually quite a bit more really that's going on. You've got the homelessness problems. Here's this graph here that shows that when it came to disorderly conduct, it had actually gone down across the nation. And when media did drill into this graph, they actually found that the Auckland statistics mirror the trend. So disorderly behaviour from the homeless is not a problem, and it's been positioned that way in the corporate media because for some reason the very, very rich actually don't like the idea that they've created poor people. It pricks the conscience if they did have one. Some of them don't, but if they did, so they want them out of sight. They want them out of the way. Just, brush them over there. Now, they need a good justification, a moral justification to feel good about this when talking to their friends. And so the idea is that they're creating disorder for retailers. But retailers have actually had improving results. Their card spending in the CBD in Auckland has improved for 5 consecutive months. Tonight, there's going to be a situation in Auckland where every single hotel is booked out because we've got Metallica in town and we've got a great big conference of about 4,500 people who are academics talking about, ironically, Indigenous issues when we're actually doing our very best to isolate and erase Indigenous rights and voices in this country under this party for the wealthy. So, Yes, there's been quite a bit going on. We've seen them fail in terms of their promises to actually get 500 more police. We've seen them boasting about how great they are on law and order when crime is actually still the same or worse in many ways. And yeah, it's kind of difficult to have a Prime Minister that's saying it's a good thing to have more of our people in prison. And, you know, the kind of detachment and the way in which they don't care and the kind of attempts to pretend that they care, they kind of come across like gaslighting to the middle classes who are under attack at the moment. There's a good reason why they're not helping you with your cost of living. There's a good reason why they oppose a capital gains tax. There's a good reason why they oppose any kind of wealth tax. And they just say that's something we're going to call names. We're going to use a tax on those people, like they do with scientists, like they do with anybody that's got evidence or that speaks up, like they do with Jacinda Ardern, for example. So you know this down, you know, in your heart, in your soul. I'm telling you the truth here. You should listen to Gary's Economics. You should go onto YouTube, see that video that he did for 30 with Guyon today, and just realise that if you don't do something about the wealthy are going to continue to consume all of the assets in this country. Inequality is going to continue to get worse under Nicola Willis and Christopher Luxon and David Seymour, because that's what they're all about. Winston isn't going to help. He's not going to change anything. You have to do the change. You have to vote for a change. You have to actually get in there and really do kotahitanga like they do here in the marae. Okay, so we need to stand for this, and this is who we are. So go out there today and make a difference. Just a small thing. Do something. So that's all I have to say today. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all again soon.
Welcome to G News, the good news.